Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today's video, as you saw from the title, is going to be all of the book recs that I have for you for reading in the fall time. Some of these are books that I have read before, and other books are ones that I've just heard really good things about reading in the fall time. They just give fall vibes, and they're on my personal TBR list to read in the fall at some point, and I figured I'd add them to the list to recommend to you guys as well. So stick around, stay tuned. I'm going to go over a few different genres that you can read and specific books within those genres. And then also I'm going to make sure to have a list of all the books that I talk about in the description box below, as well as like the authors and any books that I don't mention in today's video as well. I'm gonna have just a whole list below that you can refer back to, so in case you don't want to write them all down somewhere, you want to come back to this video anytime, you can click on it, go to the description, and just look at the list again for another recommendation for another book to read this fall. So with that being said, let's get right into it. So I have a whole list here on my laptop that I'm just going to keep with me and go through. So the very first series that I had to make sure to recommend right off the bat is, of course, the Harry Potter series. So I have the whole series here. Like, I had a box set that was before these two came out, so they're separate of the box set, but the Harry Potter series, of course, is such a good book series to read in the fall because it's set during the school time and it just gives all of the fall vibes. And if you know, you know, like, everyone decides like to watch the movies again or read the books again in the fall time. It's just the perfect books to read during this season. So I highly recommend these books. If you haven't read them before or if you want to reread them again, this is your sign to do that. So Harry Potter books for sure is the first one I wanted to mention. Then the next book series I wanted to recommend to you guys is The Hunger Games. If you haven't heard already or seen already, I'm currently rereading these books, and it's just, I don't know why, it just gives fall vibes. So I highly recommend reading the Hunger Games series in the fall time. So we're not saying trilogy anymore because there is a fourth book now, and the movie is coming out, I believe, in November. So this would be a perfect series to read this fall, especially because of the new movie that is coming out. I don't know, it just gives all the fall vibes, even if it's not necessarily set in the fall. It has hunting. Katniss, the main character, goes out hunting with her friend Gale, and then there's also, of course, the Hunger Games, which isn't necessarily fall vibes, but I don't know, it's a good dystopian series that I don't know what it is about dystopian series that I just really like reading them in the fall, which leads me into the next series that I recommend, which is another dystopian. I don't have the series in here with me, but that is the Divergent series. So the Divergent series is such a good series to read in the fall as well, just because, like I said, the dystopian vibes, I don't know what it is about it, but I highly recommend if you haven't read those already. Another one I wrote down was the Percy Jackson series, and this is it is young adult, and I haven't read all of the books, but I really loved the movies and watching them, and I just remember it just being such a fun series to read if you like Greek mythology or anything like that. I really enjoyed reading the first couple books. I didn't read the rest of it, but that's a really good series I recommend reading as well. This next one, of course, I can't not mention. This is one of my new absolute favorite series that I read recently. I still haven't finished it, actually. I still have the final book to read, but it is the ACOTAR series. So if you haven't heard of this, that stands for A Court of Thorns and Roses, which is the first book. And then it goes from there with A Court of Mist and Fury, A Court of Wings and Ruin, A Court of Frost and Starlight, and A Court of Silver Flames, which is the fifth book that I have not read yet. This series is so good. It is a fantasy series, and the first book a lot of people compare to a Beauty and the Beast retelling, but the rest of the series from there does not follow along that storyline. It takes its own path, and it's just really, really good. I cannot recommend this enough. So A Court of Thorns and Roses series. Wow, I'm gonna be saying the word series a lot. Sorry about that. Let's have a counter. But yes, the A Court of Thorns and Roses series is so good. I highly recommend these books. Going along with that theme, all of Sarah J. Maas's books are just really good fantasy books that I think would be good to read in the fall. So she also has the entire Throne of Glass series, It is a huge series. I'll put all of the books right here because I don't have it myself, but it's a huge series, as you can tell. So obviously don't stress yourselves to finish the entire series this fall, but if you want to like try getting started on that series, this is just another one that I recommend and feel like would be a really good series to start or work through during this fall. And going off of that as well, Crescent City, right here I'll put it as well because I don't have these books, but this is another series of Sarah J. Maas's. It's not finished yet, there is another book coming out, but this is just another one that it's just, her books are just really good to read in the fall. So all of those books would be really good. I do have the Throne of Glass series and the Crescent City series on my TBR as well. Definitely will not be finishing any of that by this year, but it is still on my TBR and I do want to get started on it at some point. Then another book, and this is a standalone, but another book that, well, it is the beginning of a series. I recently read this book and I rated it 5 stars. Can't talk about it highly enough. Like, it honestly was a 6-star read for me. That book is Divine Rivals. I think this would be a perfect book to read in the fall. There are gods in the book, but it also revolves around these 2 characters, a girl and a guy, that are journalists for this gazette, and they are competing for the role of columnist. And so it goes through, it's like set during the time of war, and I feel like this is just a good book that would be good to get cozy in the fall time and read with a blanket and get all comfy and cozy. And it does involve romance as well as some action from the war. It was such a well-written book. Rebecca Ross is the author, and I just don't know what it is about her writing, but it was just incredibly written, and just the idea behind it. It does involve like them writing with these magical typewriters, which is why there's typewriter letters on the cover of the book. There's just so much to it, and it's not just romance and it's not just literary fiction. It's a perfect mix and blend of both, and it's just so good. So Divine Rivals, highly recommend that one for the fall. And another fantasy book I highly recommend but have not read yet is Fourth Wing. Fourth Wing, if you haven't heard about it already, I'm kind of surprised, but Fourth Wing is highly talked about, highly rated, and this one involves a main character that's going to dragon riding school, and that's pretty much all I know about this book, but it just gives all the vibes of reading it in the fall, especially if it involves dragons. I mean, come on, what more could you ask for? So Fourth Wing, highly recommend that one as well to give a try. It is on my list to read very soon, and I'm hoping to get to it this fall, so maybe we can read it together. And another one I had on my TBR I don't have a physical copy of is Lightlark. I don't know anything about this book. I believe it is part of a series, but I have it written on my TBR list, and I know someone recommended it and said that it could be a good one to read in the fall time as well. So if you want to look up Lightlark, this is the cover of the book, and if it's part of a series, I'll have the other books included right here. But Lightlark I wrote down on my TBR, and that's all I'll say about that. I don't know much about the book. I just know that it was really highly talked about and is a book that someone recommended to read in the fall. Another series that I recommend, and I have read part of the series, not all of it, but I have talked about it a few times on this channel, and that is the Entangled with Fae series. So these are Disney story retellings, reimaginings, and they're just, like I've said many times already, any fantasy series is just a fun one to read during the fall and winter time, and these books are just really good, fun, cozy books to read because they're for the most part lighthearted and everything, and there's just like so much depth to them still, but they're fun twists on the original Disney stories. So there's 5 books out right now, and I highly recommend checking them out. I've read the first 3 books and need to get to the 4th and 5th book. I'm so excited to get to the 5th book because it's a Sleeping Beauty retelling, but these are really, really good books. I've loved them so far and rated them all pretty highly and recommend them. Next up is kind of a 2-part series slash like 2 separate series that are part of the same world, and that is the Caraval Trilogy as well as the Once Upon a Broken Heart soon-to-be trilogy. There's 2 books out right now, and the 3rd book is coming out soon. The only book that I have so far of both of those series is the Once Upon a Broken Heart. I've been told that you're supposed to read the Caraval Trilogy first, and then you're supposed to read the Once Upon a Broken Heart series after that, but I also heard that you don't necessarily have to, and the Caraval Trilogy I heard isn't as good as the Once Upon a Broken Heart books, but I heard that they're all pretty good. You can read the Once Upon a Broken Heart series and then read the Caraval Trilogy later on if you want, but they are all part of the same world, so if you are someone that prefers to read that way and read them in order, or just like can't read them out of order even if they are technically standalone series, I am really excited to get to Once Upon a Broken Heart. This is actually part of my TBR this September, this month. I haven't read the Caraval Trilogy, and I'm kind of nervous to read it just because I heard that it wasn't as good as these books. It's a little bit slower paced, and there's more romance in the Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy, so I'm trying to read these ones first, and then if I decide I want to go back, then I'll read the Caraval Trilogy afterward. But either way, those are some books that I recommend as well. Then is another 2-part series, or 2 series that are sisters with each other. They're in the same world. I don't know how to describe that, but 2 series that are part of the same world, and that is Six of Crows Duology and the Shadow and Bone Trilogy. I have the Shadow and Bone Trilogy right here, and I heard that you're supposed to read the Six of Crows Duology and then read Shadow and Bone, I believe. I could be wrong. I'll put a note up above my head if I am wrong, but Six of Crows, Crooked Kingdom, and then the Shadow and Bone trilogy is Shadow and Bone, Siege and Storm, and Ruin and Rising. So those books I've heard really, really, really good things about, especially the Six of Crows duology, Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom, and there is the found family trope in it as well, and it's just, I've heard really good things about it. So I'm excited to get to these books sometime soon as well. Lastly, for the fantasy genre, I have a duology that I actually just picked up this book, and I don't have the second book, but that is Dance of Thieves and Vow of Thieves. I'll put Vow of Thieves right here. These books have that fantasy romantic-y feel to them, so of course that is also really good books to read in the fall. And Hooked. So Hooked is part of a dark Disney story reimagining, story retelling, and it involves dark romance. So there's, I don't know how many books, I'll put them all right here, but they are all revolving around the villains and going along with like what if blank. So for Hooked, it's about Captain Hook, and it's about what if Captain Hook got Wendy. There's one about Scar, there's a bunch of different ones. There's one that not necessarily is a retelling, but is inspired by The Hunchback of Notre Dame. And the author did say that it's not like necessarily a retelling or reimagining, even a dark reimagining, but it's inspired by it. So those books, I don't know, they definitely give fall vibes, especially because it's dark romance. So I am hopefully going to get to some of these books, at least start with Hooked, and try and read that in the fall and recommend that to you as well. Then next, let's get into the murder mystery thriller genres. For the 2 books that I have already read, I would recommend House Across the Lake. This is a really, really good book by Riley Sager. I rated this 5 stars, thought it was so good. There's multiple twists in the book, and it got me. So if you're someone who likes a book with twists, if you like to try and figure out whodunit kind of thing, this one's a really fun one to read. I promise you will be surprised, and you probably won't be able to guess it. If you do, let me know in the comments below. I would be extremely shocked, but that's a good book to read, and murder mysteries in general are just so fun to read in the fall and in the winter. The other book that I highly recommend that I read is called All Good People Here, and this one is by a podcaster. If you've heard of the podcast called Crime Junkie, this is a fun book that one of the co-hosts of Crime Junkie wrote, and it was such a good book. I really enjoyed it. It's by, her name's Ashley Flowers. So if you've heard of, if you're one of the Crime Junkies, it's Ashley Flowers and Britt, and Ashley Flowers wrote the book, and she actually inspired it based on the town that Brit is from. So I thought that was a neat fact, but this is a really good book. And of course, since these two co-hosts are big fans of crime and telling the story of different crimes that have happened, and ones, especially ones that are unsolved cases, the way they go about talking in and explaining the murders and like how it happened in their podcast is already like a story in its own. Like, they're so good at talking about it, explaining what happened, and like putting you in the scenario of what happened and moving you with it, that it's just, I don't know, they just are really good at telling the story. And so of course she's really good at writing this book. So All Good People here, it's her debut novel, I'm pretty sure, but it's a really good murder mystery that I recommend you check out because yeah, it was just really well written and I enjoyed it. Another murder mystery series that I recommend is the A Good Girl's Guide to Murder series. So the A Good Girl's Guide to Murder series, this is a young adult murder mystery, and it's set at a high school where a young girl was murdered and everyone thinks that her boyfriend is the one that murdered her, but this girl at the school, who's the main character, doesn't feel or doesn't think that the boyfriend killed his girlfriend, and so she's out to try and figure out who actually killed the girl and prove that he's innocent. And so it follows along that story and goes from there. That's pretty much all I know about this series, but I've heard really good things about it. Everyone always recommends it, and like I said, a murder mystery is always a good time in the fall. It's a trilogy, but there is also a novella at the beginning called Killjoy. You can check that out as well. I'll put a picture right here of it. I don't have it, but if you have already started this series, it is a novella that you can read like after you've read these 3 books, but it just gives a little backstory to the main character and why she became passionate about murder mysteries and wanting to solve murders and like mysteries in general. So A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, highly recommend that. Another series that's on my TBR I haven't read yet is One of Us is Lying. I will put a picture of all of them right here, but that one as well, I've heard good things about. It's high on my TBR list as well, and really recommend that series. I don't know too much about it, but I know it's a group of people and yeah, I'm not even gonna try and explain it, but One of Us is Lying series, I've heard really good things about it. A few people have recommended that series to me and said it was really good, so I recommend checking that out. I definitely know I'm going to soon. If you want like a good like cozy mystery, I really recommend the Inheritance Games series. They just came out with a 4th book and it's called The Brothers Hawthorne. It's part of the Inheritance Games trilogy. So the first book is called The Inheritance Games. The second book is called The Hawthorne Legacy. The third book is called The Final Gambit, and the 4th book, like I said, is called The Brothers Hawthorne. So it's about this girl named Avery. She gets notified that she is going to be getting this gentleman's will. He passed away. He is extremely wealthy. He's a billionaire with a B, and she's getting his money passed down to her, that it was written in the will that she was going to get all the money. So when she goes to meet up and they're reading through the will with the lawyers and everything, she finds out that she's getting pretty much almost all of his fortune. And she has no idea why, because she doesn't know this guy. She's not related to him or anything. And so her along with the family of the gentleman that died are very confused as to why he's passing down the will to her. And so she's going through and trying to figure out why he's giving the will to her and how she's connected to him, how the heck he knows her, and all of that. So I don't know, it gave Clue vibes. It was such a fun series to read. I sped through it, I really enjoyed it, and I loved like the feel of cozy mystery that it gave. She's forced to live in his mansion. Oh darn, she's forced to live in his mansion for at least a year in order to be able to claim his fortune. And so while she's figuring out everything and trying to learn more about like her connection to him and why he passed down the will to her, she decides, okay, well, I'll live in the mansion in the meantime until I figure it out, because that's the only way she's going to be able to figure out more about it. And so she learns like all these secret passageways that are in the mansion and all this stuff, and it's just like, it's so cool like reading through everything, and it just, like I said, it gives Clue vibes, and it just was so fun to read through like all the different hidden rooms, the different puzzles that they do, and trying to figure it out myself. Like, it was so fun to read, just a quick, easy, cozy mystery read. So check out this series, I highly recommend it. I rated these books all highly, and really enjoyed reading them. And I haven't gotten to Brothers Hawthorne yet. Like I said, that book just came out. I actually just got it recently, and I'm excited to read through it, but it's, I think, more focused on the brothers, the Hawthorne brothers, which are the grandsons of the gentleman that passed. And I don't know if it's in their point of view, but I know that it is focused on the brothers. There is a love triangle in this series between Avery and 2 of the 3 brothers, so I enjoyed that as well. But it's not like an obnoxious love triangle going on, and it does focus a lot on the clues and the will and like everything like that. Like, it does focus on that mystery a lot, and then there's just an extra subplot of romance along with it, so it's not too heavily focused on romance or anything like that. I think it's a good blend of both, but I really enjoyed it. Highly recommend checking those out. And that's it for the murder mystery genre, but I'll have a whole list below. I have so many books that I didn't want to like go into because there's just so many to choose from, but the ones that I listed are just some popular ones as well as the books that I personally read and enjoyed. So I'll have more of a list down in the description box below for you to check out if you want to read some murder mystery and thriller books. Then as far as any Halloween themed books, I've only read 2 books, and they're a 2-part series, a duology, but unfortunately I haven't read too many other Halloween books. I have a lot on my TBR, so again, those will be listed down below in the description box. But the 2 books that I read were the Ex Hex and the second book to that, which is called The Kiss Curse. So the Ex Hex and The Kiss Curse were really good books. I do want to say that they are pretty steamy books, so if you like that kind of thing, if you like steamy romance books, you'll enjoy these books for sure. But they were just really good romances that I enjoyed, and it was just fun getting into the Halloween feel. They kind of reminded me of Halloween Town vibes, so I really enjoyed that part of it. But yeah, I recommend checking out the Ex Hex and The Kiss Curse. Those are really good Halloween books. And again, I'll have more Halloween themed books listed down in the description box below, but those were the only 2 so far that I have read that were specifically Halloween themed. So with all of that being said, that is all of the books that I have for you today to recommend to you. Oh wait, One series I forgot to mention, I totally forgot to mention, and this is actually going off of the Inheritance game series. It's by the same author, and it gives the same vibes of, you know, solving murder mysteries and all of that. That is called The Natural. So The Natural series, I'll put the 4 books right here. The Natural series I've heard really, really good things about recently, and it's based on these kids that are all really smart. They're really good at contributing to helping solve the murders in different ways. They all have different specialties, different special traits about them that help them solve these murders, and so they work alongside the police force and they help solve these murder mysteries and everything. And so I've heard really good things about it, and I definitely want to get to these soon. So many people have said that they actually, they really enjoyed the Inheritance game series, and they even enjoyed these books more than that. So I recommend reading both series. They're both, well, I can only say the Inheritance game series is really, really good. I do still recommend reading those. They're definitely cozy mysteries. But the Naturals I haven't gotten to yet, and I'm so eager to get to because, again, so many people have been talking about this series a lot recently, and I've heard nothing but good things about. So the Naturals series, I have it right here. You should check those out soon. It's by the same author, Jennifer Lynn Barnes. So that is all of the books that I have for you today to recommend to read this fall. I hope you check some of them out. I know I definitely will. So many of these and more are on my TBR, and like I said a few times, I'm going to have a huge list down in the description box below of all the books that I talked about today, as well as more that are on my TBR that I didn't mention in today's video. But I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, make sure to give it a big thumbs up. Leave a comment below what you thought, if any of these books you have read yourself before or are going to read this fall and are excited to try. And then also subscribe if you aren't already subscribed to my channel for more videos. I do a ton of book videos as well as some Disney videos and different Florida videos and vlogs and everything because I do live here in Florida. So make sure to subscribe and stick around for more videos to come, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye!
comfortable, and no one seems to hold me like you do.